Hi, everyone. Welcome. Glad you could make it tonight. We're going through the book of Genesis. We're starting tonight at Genesis chapter 35. We're continuing with the life of Jacob. And so I'll give you a quick recap. The last time we met, we read Jacob had tricked his brother Esau out of his blessing and run off in fear of Esau's retaliation. Esau wanted to kill him, so Jacob ran off. He went and he lived in the land of his uncle, and he married his uncle's daughters, and he became rich. He had a bunch of kids, and as he was finally deciding to return back home, he was afraid to go back to the land of his father because Esau was still there, and Jacob didn't know how Esau was going to react. He was very afraid. And along the way, on the journey back, Jacob met with God, and he wrestled with God, and God said, "From now on, your name's going to be Israel." So God changed his name, and Jacob had this amazing encounter with God. So he met back up with Esau. They had a pretty good reunion, and so Jacob seemed like he was doing okay. He went to go live in Shechem, and by this time, he's got some grown children, and his daughter gets raped, and two of his sons, to avenge their sister, go and slaughter all the men who participated, all the men of Shechem who were under the authority of this person who raped their sister. So now Jacob is scared again, and that's where we left off. Jacob is like, "Why did you do this?" He's talking to his sons. "Why did you do this to me? Now the people in this land are going to be angry with us, and we're not going to have a place to stay, and they're going to come after us and kill us." So that's where we left off, and I just want to welcome everybody. I see Darren's here tonight. Family's here. Good to see you guys. We had some technical difficulties a few times, so I'm glad that you guys can make it tonight, and I'm glad things seem to be working out so far. So let's open up with prayer, and then we'll start with Genesis. Thank you, God, so much for all those who have gathered here tonight. We ask for your presence. We ask you to speak to us and communicate to us as we read these words from the past about you, Lord, the history of your work with humanity. Thank you, Lord, for all that you're doing in the world, and we ask for your help in this time of the world's distress. We ask for healing, for restoration, and for blessing for all those who are in financial distress right now. We ask for help and strength for all the medical personnel and the people who are endangering themselves every day to provide us groceries and different things, Lord, and different services. Just please protect them, and please heal and restore the world. Thank you so much, Lord. Amen. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to these chapters tonight. So I'm reading out of the NIV translation. You can read out of any translation you want. It might be a little different, and that's fine. And if you have comments or questions, put them in the chat. And Jeremy's here. He's going to be moderating the chat, and he'll let me know if you have any questions. So, chapter 35. Then God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes, Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I've gone." So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns around them, so that no one pursued them. Let's stop there and just talk about some of these interesting things. So again, Jacob is in distress and God speaks to him. And Jacob's reaction is that he tells everyone in his household, get rid of all those idols, get rid of those foreign gods. We're going to purify ourselves. We're not going to have any more of this. And if you remember from the previous chapters, even his own wives had idols that they were maintaining in the household, even though they were supposed to be worshipers of the one God, the creator God, the God of Abraham. But people in his household were worshiping idols. So now Jacob is like, look, God told us to go up to Bethel. We're going to purify ourselves, get rid of all that stuff. He buried it, and they set out. And an amazing thing happens. No one pursued them. And that's significant because they had really aroused the anger of the people who were living around them. And with they came into the land and they started these violent actions right away. And Jacob was really concerned that there was going to be a backlash and that there were just going to be people who rose up and killed them. But the fear of God fell on these towns around them, and no one came after them. So let's continue in verse 6. And Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. There he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, which means God of Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Allon Bakuth, which means oak of weeping. After Jacob returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. God said to him, "Your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel." So he named him Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I give to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you." Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it. Jacob called the place where God had talked with him Bethel. So we have God appearing to Jacob again, and again confirming that he was going to bless him and give him that land, give his descendants that land, and that kings were going to come from him. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful promises that God was stating to Jacob. Okay, continuing on, verse 16. And then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, which means son of my trouble. But his father named him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. So Jacob had 12 sons. The sons of Leah: Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob; Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel: Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah: Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's servant Zilpah: Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Okay, so we see in this portion of the chapter another example of humans behaving badly. Jacob's oldest son has slept with his father's concubine. Not cool at all. And we're going to keep seeing humans behave badly as we continue on through these chapters. You know, a lot of people get the idea that the Bible is full of a bunch of people doing God's will and everybody's doing great. But really, it's not. It's quite the opposite. It is a bunch of people mostly doing what they shouldn't do and sometimes clinging on to faith in God. We do have examples of people doing righteous acts, but throughout the Bible, even our heroes are often doing things that are against God's will. So, yeah, let's stop there and see if anybody has any questions or comments.
Nothing so far.
So far, are we okay? Is everybody hearing me at least?
Yep. Street.
Okay, good. All right. So, okay, now get ready because the next chapter is genealogy. It's going to be Esau's descendants, and this can be a little bit dry, but there is treasure in these genealogies. It's quite amazing that we have these histories, the heritage and the generations that were passed down. So it might be a little boring while I'm reading the names, but I want you to pay attention. I have a little contest. I want to see who can discover how many times you hear the name Aholibama. Okay? So as I read through this next chapter, count the times that you hear Aholibama, and we'll see who gets it right. Okay, so, and then I'll tell you about Aholibama, and we'll talk about the genealogies a little bit. So chapter 36, this is the account of the family line of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the women of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibama, daughter of Ahah and granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite, also Basemath, daughter of Ishmael and sister of Nebaioth. Adah bore Eliphaz to Esau, Basemath bore Reuben, and Aholibama bore Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the sons of Esau who were born to him in Canaan. Esau took his wives and his sons and daughters and all the members of his household, as well as his livestock and all his other animals and all the goods he had acquired in Canaan, and moved to a land some distance from his brother Jacob. Their possessions were too great for them to remain together. The land where they were staying could not support them both because of their livestock. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country of Seir. This is the account of the family line of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Esau's wife Adah, and Reuel, the son of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Eliphaz: Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Adah. The sons of Reuel: Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Aholibama, daughter of Anah and granddaughter of Zibeon, whom she bore to Esau: Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs among Esau's descendants. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, chiefs Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These were the chiefs descended from Eliphaz and Edom, and they were the grandsons of Adah. Still with me? The sons of Esau's son Ruel, chiefs Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These were the chiefs descended from Ruel in Edom. They were the grandsons of Esau's wife Basemath. The sons of Esau's wife Aholibamah, chiefs Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. These were the chiefs descended from Esau's wife Aholibamah, daughter of Anah. And these were the sons of Esau, that is Edom, and these were their chiefs. These were the sons of Seir, the Horite, who were living in the region: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishan, Ezer, and Dishan. These sons of Seir in Edom were the Horite chiefs. The sons of Lotan, Hori, and Homam. Timnah was Lotan's sister. The sons of Shobal, Alvan, Manahath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. The sons of Zibeon, Aya, Anna. This is Anna, who discovered the hot springs in the desert while he was grazing the donkeys of his father Zibeon. Hanging in there? The children of Anah, Dishan and Aholibamah, daughter of Anah. The sons of Dishan, Hemdan, Eshban, Ithran, and Karan. The sons of Ezer, Bilhan, Zavan, and Akan. The sons of Dishan, Uz, and Aran. These were the Horite chiefs: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishan, Ezer, and Disham. These were the Horite chiefs according to their divisions in the land of Seir. These were the kings who reigned in Edom before any Israelite king reigned. Bela, son of Beor, became the king of Edom. His city was named Dinhabah. When Bela died, Jobab, the son of Zerah from Bozrah, succeeded him as king. When Jobab died, Husham from the land of Timonites succeeded him as king. When Husham died, Hadad, son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, succeeded him as king. His city was named Avith. Almost done, guys. When Hadad died, Samlah from Masrekah succeeded him as king. When Samlah died, Shual from Rehoboth on the river succeeded him as king. When Shaul died, Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, succeeded him as king. When Baal-Hanan, son of Akbor, died, Hadad succeeded him as king. His city was named Pau, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mezahab. These were the chiefs descended from Esau by name according to their clans and regions: Timnah, Alva, Jetheth, Aholibamah, Elah, Pinan, Kenaz, Temam, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Aram. These were the chiefs of Edom according to their settlements in the land they occupied. This is the family line of Esau, the father of the Edomites. All right, how many Aholibamahs? Put your guesses in. How many times did we hear that name? I'll come back to that question as you put in your guesses. But I will talk a little bit about Aholibamah. She was one of the wives of Esau. And remember that at that time, a lot of marriages were political. And I mean, of course, they're still political marriages today, but so Esau was kind of a newcomer in this land of Seir, and he ends up marrying the granddaughter of Seir. Her father was Anah. He was a Horite chief. And so he kind of marries into this clan, this leadership. So he was kind of marrying well so that I don't know if it was only a political arrangement. He might have really liked this woman, but he married into this clan, and that kind of connected him and probably made a beneficial alliance there. So Aholibamah was one of his wives. And what's interesting is that as she's mentioned a bunch of times, she's mentioned as a chief of the clans. And so we don't have a lot of examples in the Bible of women in political leadership. We do have some, like Deborah, but here in this, these two verses, 40 and 41, we have two women who are mentioned as tribal chiefs in these clans, Timnah and Aholibamah. And so I just think that's interesting that they're mentioned as leadership. So we see examples, although it was a patriarchal culture, there are examples of women in power. Okay, so let's see. Okay, the correct answer is 7. 7 times Aholibamah was mentioned. So hopefully that helped you pass through the names a little more with a little more interest. Okay, now we're getting ready to start a really exciting story. We're getting ready to start with the life of Joseph. And Jesus, when he was talk about the scriptures, he said, the scriptures testify about me. And already up to this point in the scripture, we've seen examples of how Jesus appears, not Jesus himself, but we've had appearances of the angel of the Lord, which is probably an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ. But we also have within the stories, within the human stories, we have parallels in the lives of the people in this book. We have parallels with our Savior, Jesus. And so we've seen that with Jacob and Esau's story, and Cain and Abel's story, and the story of Abraham and his son Isaac. So as we're going on, now we're getting to the story of Joseph, and Joseph has many parallels with Jesus. So we'll start reading this story, and then we'll talk about some of the parallels. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Grab some water. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him, and they could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So far in this, we're seeing some parallels to Jesus. Joseph is the beloved son of his father. He's the one that his father loves and gives special attention to. And that reminds us of Jesus being the beloved son of the Father. Joseph had a dream of the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. And the Bible tells us that all will bow before Jesus. Jesus will be the ruler of all. Joseph's brothers were jealous of him. And this is the same thing that happened to Jesus. When Jesus was going around and doing miracles, people were jealous of him. The religious leaders, especially, did not like that Jesus was getting all the attention of the people. So let's continue on the story, and let's stop, and I'll take any comments or questions from you guys before we continue on. So any comments?
No, we had questions about the earlier topic about Ken asked if people married for financial gain mostly back then, or was love secondhand for marriages back then?
Yeah, I think that our concept, Western concept of like falling in love and getting married was not a common practice. I mean, we do see in the story of Jacob and Rachel that Jacob really loved Rachel, but a lot of the stories seem to be just simple arranged marriages, not just it in the same way that marriages are arranged still in many parts of the world today. So I think our concept of Western romance is kind of foreign to this culture. So yeah, I think marriages often were political or financial, and they were often arranged. So, and they were often stayed in the family as well. Notice that many of the people that we've encountered so far have married their half-sister or their cousin. So that was very common. Anything else?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, cool. Thanks for your question, Ken. All right, let's keep going with the story of Joseph. So Joseph's brothers are jealous of him, and now we're at verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off to the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. "Let's not take his life," he said. "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." So his brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, His brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, and one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Okay, so here we're seeing some more parallels with Joseph's life and Jesus's life. So Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, and in the same way that the Jews betrayed one of their own, they betrayed Jesus, their brother in the faith. Joseph was turned over by brothers to foreigners. And so Joseph's brothers sold him to go be a slave in Egypt. He turned him over to foreigners. And this is what the Jews did when they turned over Jesus, their fellow Jew, to the Romans to be killed. They sold him for 20 shekels of silver. Jesus was betrayed by Judas for 30 pieces of silver. So we have that too. We have Reuben wanted to save Joseph. Reuben actually had in mind that he was going to save Joseph. But where was Reuben when all this was happening? Reuben wasn't there. He wasn't paying attention. And that kind of calls to my mind the disciples of Jesus. Where were they? Of course, they wanted to rescue Jesus. They didn't want Jesus to be turned over to foreigners or killed. But where were they in Jesus's time of need? They all fled, and none of them were there at Jesus's hour of need. So those are the parallels that I see so far. Do you guys notice any others that I'm missing? Anybody got anything to say?
Nothing so far.
Okay. Cool. Well, Joseph's story gets quite long and it's really great. So I'm looking forward to continuing with that. But at this time, there's going to be a little story interrupting Joseph's story here. And it's so pretty rough. So here we go. We're going to read that together. So chapter 38. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son named Onan. She gave birth to still another son named Shelah. It was at Kezeb that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." Let's stop there for a minute. So this practice that Judah is suggesting is just a practice in that culture where if a woman was married to a man and then the man died, leaving her no offspring that she could, raise up and have as to carry on her family line. If the man who died had a brother, the brother would take and have a child with his brother's wife so that that child would be considered his brother's descendant. So this is what Judah is telling Onan to do. And so Onan is supposed to be carrying on his brother's family line for him. So verse 9, we're going on. But Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up." For he thought, he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in her father's household. Okay, let's stop there for explanation and questions. So both of Judah's older sons, sons that were of marrying age, have now been put to death by the Lord. And now he's got Shelah, but apparently Shelah is just still a kid. So Judah says, okay, look, Tamar, go live at your father's house. And then when Shelah's old enough, I'll give him to you, to have this offspring, and we'll continue that way. And so Tamar goes and she's living in her father's household. So are there any questions or comments so far?
Nope.
Okay. So verse 12, after a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira the Adullamite went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where's the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who live there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." Should we stop there? We have questions?
Let's have one comment from Ken.
Okay.
He says, "This is so different from today's thought. This would be considered a sin for a brother to fulfill this deed to bear an offspring."
Yeah, it is very different. And we would have to remember that the culture was very different. Your future, there was no retirement plan. So your whole future provision and everything was dependent on your descendants. And so to not have descendants and to be a widow was a very difficult thing. So this was a provision for a widow, but of course, this is not what we would consider to be a good practice today, because in most places in the world, women do have opportunities to provide for themselves in other ways. So it's not the same kind of situation. So anything else?
Yeah. Mike says no Social Security. And Lisa says that's a lot of waiting and patience, waiting for a child to grow up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here we go. Verse 24, about 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned to death. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, this one came out first. But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, so this is how you have broken out. And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. Okay, cool. Well, let's stop and talk about this. So we have this strange event, really. 2 men got put to death. Tamar's without a husband. Shelah grows up. Judah didn't give him to her. Then Tamar concocts this scheme that she's going to go out and pretend to be a prostitute. And it actually works out for her. She's able to disguise herself, gets her father-in-law to sleep with her, gets him to give her his staff and his seal, and then she runs off. And then when she's discovered to be pregnant, and notice they didn't even consider any other options here. She's guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she's now pregnant. In that time and culture, the only way you were pregnant is if you were married. Everything else was prostitution. It was not, there was no such thing as, people just having premarital sex and all that was okay. Oh yeah, it was probably okay for the men. But if you were a woman, your family would probably kill you. So here we have, and that's exactly what Judah planned to do. He was going to burn her to death. So, but what I find really interesting here is that Judah actually admits that he was wrong. He admits what happened, and he actually says, she's more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her my son Shelah. He doesn't even seem to be upset that he got tricked. He recognizes that he did something wrong in not giving her his son. And he actually said she was more righteous than him. So everything seems to be smoothed over then. Everything's okay. And then she gives birth to twins. So that's really interesting. All right. So anybody have any comments or questions?
No more comments or questions.
All right. Hey, Nicole. So, welcome. All right, well, we're going to continue then with the story of Joseph. And so, Joseph has been sold to the Egyptians as a slave. His brothers have dipped his robe in blood and showed it to his father, and his father thinks he's dead. But really, he's been sold as a slave in Egypt, and God is with him. So let's read chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all of that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought here to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Wow, so we finally have a guy who's doing the right thing with women. Joseph is maintaining his righteousness, and he's not giving in to probably what was a tempting situation. So we have Joseph again suffering for righteousness. Gets thrown into prison. Potiphar's wife lied about him, and now he's stuck in prison. But Joseph continued to be blessed by the Lord. The Lord blessed what he was doing there, and he just kept showing great leadership and running things well. And so he was put in charge. So that's, I think, a great place to stop reading tonight and just take any final questions or comments that anybody wants to make.
And Nicole says it must have been really scary for Joseph being falsely accused by the king's wife.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was a blessing just to get put in prison instead of killed for that. So, yeah, it must have been scary. And also to even be sold as a slave by your own brothers, that's really hard. So, okay, well, for just looking back over all that we read tonight, again, we've got stories that come from a very different time and place, a very different culture. And we're not looking at a lot of people that we can look to as examples of how we ought to act. And it's really the Lord's grace that was with people. God's grace is shown throughout these people's lives, because even when they're worshiping idols and doing all kinds of stuff they shouldn't be doing, God is still with them. Jacob, he tricked his brother. God was still with him. God saved him and delivered him. And so we just continue to see God's faithfulness and goodness despite the bad activities of humans. So thanks for meeting, everybody. And any final things that anybody had to say?
Nope.
Okay, I'm really glad everybody could join tonight. And I'm really thankful that we didn't have technical difficulties tonight. So God bless you all this week. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, same time. And we will pick up at chapter 40. Good night and God bless.